The first thing Kaito noticed when he dropped out of fold space above his home system was that the stars were wrong. Not the stars themselves. They were where they always were, fixed and indifferent. It was the light between them. The orbital platforms that should have ringed Analysis like a necklace of warm fire were dark. The comm traffic that usually filled every frequency with the noisy, overlapping, wonderfully aggravating chatter of 12 million people was gone. He sat in the cockpit of his battered two-seat courier and held very still. The way a man holds still when he steps through a door into a dark room and doesn't yet know what's inside. Analyst control, this is Courier 77 Kappa, inbound from the outer run. He waited. Analyst control, please respond. Nothing. He checked his instruments. The instruments were fine. The silence was not a malfunction. He thought of his sister's last message, which had reached him 6 weeks ago. 3 relay jumps out on the outer run. She had been laughing in it. She always laughed when she talked to him. She made fun of his hair. It was too long now, she said. He looked like one of the old fishing ship captains from the history feeds, and she had done an impression of him that was both cruel and accurate. He had listened to it 4 times on the long empty stretches between relay stations. He knew it by heart. He brought the courier into the shadow of a dead platform and sat very still for a long time, watching. The Stresso fleet was not hiding. That was the first sign of how thoroughly they had won. They moved between the orbital lanes in long, slow formations, vast angular ships the color of charred bone, their running lights a cold violet that Kaito had only ever seen in threat footage. They were the Gavana's Empire's forward corps, the ones who had taken the outer reaches, the ones that every military briefing had said would not reach the inner systems for at least 3 more years, the ones that every political council had voted to let someone else deal with. 3 years had apparently been wrong. He counted 40 ships in the first formation alone. He stopped counting after that. Kaito had been a courier pilot for 7 years. Before that, he had been a fighter pilot for 5, until a piece of debris from a ship he himself had destroyed had punched through his canopy and taken 2 fingers from his right hand. He had been repaired, more or less. The fingers still didn't track right in cold weather. He had been given a medical discharge and a handshake and a generous settlement and the distinct impression that he was no longer the type of person the fleet wanted to deal with. He had spent 3 months being angry about it, then taken the settlement money and bought a courier ship and made himself useful in a different way, hauling medical supplies and machine parts, and once an entire family of refugees from a moon that nobody in authority had wanted to admit was in trouble. That had been 2 years ago. He had not been back to Analysis since. He needed information. He also needed to not be seen. Both of those needs led him to the same place. Portmaster Hess, who lived on a jury-rigged platform in the shadow of Analysis's second moon, and who had, in Kaito's experience, eyes everywhere and the moral flexibility of a politician combined with the survival instincts of something that lived in deep water. Getting there without being picked up by the Stresso patrol grid took him 4 hours and a burn pattern he had invented himself, and which he was fairly sure would have gotten him court-martialed back when there had been a court to do the marshaling. He came in dark, on battery power, with every sensor reflective panel on the hull angled at the maximum bleed-off coefficient, sliding through a debris field that the Stresso scanners apparently considered too small to be worth investigating. Hess opened the airlock without comment. He was a small, leathery man with the elaborate mustache of someone who had once been very stylish and now simply hadn't gotten around to changing. He took one look at Kaito's face and poured 2 glasses of something amber without asking. "Your family," Hess said. "Tell me." Hess told him. It took a long time. Kaito sat and drank and did not move, and by the end of it the glass was empty and the room felt smaller than it had at the beginning. His sister, his mother, the people in his district who had organized the first resistance. They had been the first ones the Stresso had made an example of. The Gavanas did not believe in leaving uncertainty about what resistance would cost. "How many people are left down there?" Kaito asked. His voice came out steadier than he expected. "On planet? Maybe 8 million. They've been relocating the others." Hess did not explain where the others were being relocated to. He didn't need to. "Ryu?" Kaito asked. Ryu was his oldest friend, which meant the person who had spent the most years being a useful thorn in his side. Hess almost smiled. "Ryu is very much alive. He stole a Gavana's transport 3 weeks ago and has been causing problems with it. He is currently hiding in the Belda asteroid belt and sending transmissions that the Stresso have not been able to trace." He calls himself Nagaraboshi now. Hess paused. Shooting star. Kaido looked at his empty glass. That's very dramatic of him. You know Ryu? I know Ryu. Kaido set the glass down and stood up. What else do I need to know? There's a woman, Hess said. She came in on a ship unlike anything in the registry. Old design, 3 masts, rigged like a deep-sail vessel. She's been in system for 2 weeks. She helped 3 separate groups of refugees reach the transit corridors that the Stresso haven't locked down yet. No one knows her name. People are calling her Sophia. She's one person. She is one person who appears to be in 6 places at once and who the Stresso have tried to intercept 4 times. Hess's expression was very carefully neutral. They have not succeeded, Kaido considered this. And Captain Kogar, the almost smile left Hess's face entirely. He commands the occupation from the old governance tower. He has 300 Stresso soldiers in city and a command ship in high orbit that could level the surface in 4 passes if he ordered it. Hess paused. He has not ordered it yet. I believe this is because he wants something from the planet that requires the planet to still exist. I do not yet know what. Kaido walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars, at the cold violet running lights moving between them. I need to get to the surface, he said. That would be an extremely poor decision, Hess said. Yes, Kaito agreed. He turned away from the viewport. Help me do it anyway. It took Kaito and Hess another 6 hours to work out a route, and another 4 to execute it. And in the process, Kaito almost ran into a Stresso patrol at close range and had to kill his engine entirely and coast through 60 kilometers of dark space on momentum alone, the cockpit growing cold enough that his breath turned to vapor. He sat in the cold and did not think about his sister laughing. He thought about approach angles and hull temperature and the 17 degrees of sensor arc he needed to stay inside. He made planetfall in a dry riverbed 200 kilometers from the city, buried the courier under a camouflage net that had seen better years, and walked. The planet looked like itself. That was somehow worse than he had expected. The sky was still the yellow-bronze color it always was at dusk. The scrub growth along the riverbed was still silver-gray and smelled of resin. The distant mountains still had the same jagged silhouette he had memorized as a child. Everything looked the same, and everything was completely different, and the combination sat in his chest like something swallowed wrong. He met the first survivors in an abandoned water processing station on the edge of what had been a farming collective. There were 11 of them, 3 adults, the rest children. They had been there for 9 days. The children looked at him the way children, who have learned that strangers can mean danger, look at strangers. He sat down cross-legged on the floor and waited for them to decide what they thought of him, because you can't hurry that kind of math. One of the adults, a woman named Dara, who had clearly been doing the heavy work of keeping everyone alive, and together told him what she knew about the occupation in the flat, efficient voice of someone who had burned through the shock and was now operating on something harder. Captain Kogar was quartering soldiers in the city. Movement was restricted. Food was rationed, and the rations were calculated to make people compliant rather than healthy. There were resistance pockets, but they were scattered and didn't communicate. The Stresso had learned to follow communications. What does Kogar want? Kaito asked. Dara looked at him. The Ark, she said. He hadn't heard that word in years. The Ark was, he searched his memory, something from the old histories. A ship, or a concept, or a symbol. Something left over from the time before the Federation, when the 15th solar system had been something other than a middle-distance trading outpost. It's real, Dara said, watching his face. People from the outer settlements know. It's been kept quiet in the cities for a long time, a generation ship. The original. The one that brought the first settlers here 1,200 years ago. It's been in deep storage in the Belda Belt for 8 centuries. Kaito was quiet for a moment. Kogar wants an 800-year-old colony ship. He doesn't want to use it, Dara said. He wants to destroy it. It's in the old songs, the old stories. Something about if the Ark survives, the people survive. It's a symbol. It's the kind of symbol that makes people keep fighting when they should have given up 3 months ago. She paused. He knows that. Kaito sat with this. Outside, the bronze sky was darkening toward night, and somewhere in the distance he could hear the faint subsonic hum of a Stresso patrol craft doing lazy circles over the flatland. I'm going to find Ryu, he said. Dara's expression said she had questions about the wisdom of this plan. He stole a ship, Kaito said. I need a ship. He looked around at the 11 people in the processing station. And I need a place that's safer than this. Give me 3 days. She looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded, once, the way someone nods when they've made a calculation and are not sure it adds up, but they're going to let it run. He slipped out of the processing station at midnight and walked until dawn, and then he had the peculiar experience of being mugged by Ryu. Not mugged exactly. Ryu had always had a talent for appearing from directions that seemed impossible, and he had used it now to step out from behind a boulder that Kaido would have sworn was solid rock, and press what turned out to be a piece of pipe against the back of Kaido's neck. "I could have shot you 5 times, Ryu said. "Pipe," Kaido said. Ryu looked at the pipe. "I would have shot you 5 times if I had a working weapon," he amended. "But the point stands." He lowered the pipe. "When did you get back?" 2 days ago. Ryu's face went through something. "You know about." "Yes." Ryu nodded. He had a scar Kaido didn't recognize running from his ear to his jaw, new enough to still be pink. He looked thinner. He looked harder. He looked, underneath all of that, like exactly the same person who had once talked Kaido into a scheme involving a stolen exam and 3 goats that had taken 6 years off both their lives. "The ship?" Kaido said. Ryu grinned. It was not a comfortable grin. "Wait until you see the ship." The stolen Stresso transport was not a beautiful vessel. It had been used for cargo hauling, which meant it had been repaired in the field multiple times by people who didn't particularly care what it looked like afterward, and the whole thing had the aesthetic of something that had survived several arguments and emerged from all of them dented. But it flew, and it had a working fold drive, and it had been modified. Ryu had been busy with a sensor deflection array that wasn't strictly authorized by any regulation Kaido could name. Baloo was there too, which meant the ship was considerably more crowded than it had been. Baloo was the third of their old trio and was technically not human. He was Ceton, which meant he was large, covered in close-set hair, and possessed of a physical strength that he deployed with great gentleness in daily life and devastating precision when the situation required it. He had been on Analysis working as a cargo handler when the Stresso came, and had spent the past 3 months being systematically underestimated by the occupation forces, which he found moderately amusing. "You look terrible," Baloo told Kaido with genuine warmth. "Thank you," Kaido said. The first night aboard, they planned. Ryu had been in contact with 4 separate resistance groups and had a partial picture of the occupation's weak points. Baloo had heard things in the cargo yards that the Stresso soldiers hadn't noticed him hearing. Kaito had the thing Dara had told him about the Ark. When he explained it, the cabin went quiet in a particular way. "They'll find it," Ryu said finally. "It's only a matter of time. They've been scanning the Belta-Belt systematically. They'll cover the whole thing in," he did the math, 6 weeks. "Then we have 6 weeks," Kaido said. "To do what exactly?" "Get to the Ark first, move it or defend it, and get those 11 people in the processing station somewhere they won't be rounded up."
He paused.
"Also topple the occupation. But we can probably do that second." Ryu looked at him with the expression he had been deploying since childhood when Kaido suggested something that was either brilliant or catastrophically stupid. "I missed you," he said. "I also would like to register that this is insane." "Noted," Kaido said. "You still in?" Ryu had already turned to the navigation console. Baloo, with great calm, began checking the condition of the ship's limited armaments. It wasn't an answer exactly. It was better than an answer. They found the woman called Sophia on the 3rd day. She found them, more precisely. The 3-masted ship appeared on their sensors without warning, having apparently come from a direction that their sensors had been covering, and she hailed them on a frequency that was not on any official registry, and that Ryu stared at for a moment before answering. Her voice was clear and unhurried. "You are looking for the Ark," she said. It was not a question. Ryu looked at Kaido. Kaido leaned toward the comm. "Who are you?" "Someone who has been waiting for you to ask that question," she said, which was the most frustrating possible answer. "Then, I know where the Ark is. I also know that Kogar has triangulated the sector. You have 4 days, not 6. She gave them coordinates. She did not ask for anything in return. When Ryu tried to ask more questions, she said pleasantly, "The coordinates will lead you where you need to go, and then close the channel." "I don't like this," Ryu said. "She's been helping people get out," Kaido said. "Hess told me. Hess also told you about me, and I steal ships for a living. That's not necessarily a recommendation." "Go to the coordinates," Baloo said from the corner. When both Kaito and Ryu turned to look at him, he raised his eyebrows. "She gave us coordinates. We do not have a better plan. Go to the coordinates." They went to the coordinates. The Ark was exactly where she had said it would be, in a cleft between two asteroids, the size of small moons, held by the gravity between them in a long, slow tumble that would have looked, at the right angle, like sleep. It was massive. Kaito had seen large ships. He had seen fleet carriers and colony transports, and the enormous slow haulers that moved the mineral wealth of the outer system, and none of them had prepared him for the Ark. It was old in a way that old buildings are old, in a way that makes you feel the weight of all the time that happened before you existed. The hull was a metal he didn't recognize, the color of deep water, and the age had given it a texture that wasn't damage exactly. It was more like the texture of a river stone, shaped by something patient and vast. On the hull, barely legible, were markings in an alphabet that predated the current common script by so many centuries that Kaito couldn't read it, but which he recognized from the old historical murals as the first script, the one the original settlers had carved on every surface that mattered. "How is it intact?" Ryu said quietly. "It was built to last," Balu said. He was standing at the viewport with both arms hanging loose at his sides, his usual careful neutrality entirely absent. His face was doing something Kaito had almost never seen it do. "My people's stories say the builders of the first ships were not like the builders now. They built for permanence. They built things that were meant to survive them." He was quiet for a moment. "I did not know if those stories were true." Kaito looked at the Ark. He thought about what Dara had said. If the Ark survives, the people survive. He had been turning it over in his mind for 2 days, trying to decide if he thought it was true in any way beyond the symbolic. And now he was looking at the thing, and he understood that it didn't matter which kind of true it was. Both kinds did the same work. "Koger knows the sector," he said, "not the exact location yet. We have a window." He turned from the viewport. "We wake it up." Ryu stared at him. "We wake up an 800-year-old ship." "We wake up an 800-year-old ship," Kaito confirmed. Sophia said the coordinates would lead us where we need to go. This is where we need to go. "I'm beginning to think Sophia has an unusual definition of practical," Ryu said, but he was already running the board link protocols. It took them the better part of 16 hours. The Ark systems were not dead. Exactly. They were in a state that Kaito had no precise technical term for. Something between dormancy and patience, as if the ship had been waiting with the specific quality of waiting that doesn't involve any urgency. The power systems came online in sequence, oldest first, each one activating the next in a chain that had been designed to survive centuries of inactivity and had. When the main drive finally came to life, a sound that Kaito felt in his teeth more than heard, a low resonance that built over 3 minutes from nothing to something that vibrated the deck plates. Ryu let out a breath he had clearly been holding for some time. "That's not possible," he said. "It's working," Balu said with great satisfaction. "That's what I said." The Stresso patrol arrived on the 4th hour after the drive came online. 3 ships, the fast angular kind that the Gavanas used for interception, coming in from the direction of Analis, in a formation that said they had been directed here rather than arrived by chance. Kaito had expected this. He had thought about it for all 16 hours of the Ark's reactivation, and what he had arrived at was not a plan so much as a set of decisions made in advance. "Ryu," he said, "the transport." Ryu understood immediately, which was one of the things Kaito valued most about him. He didn't ask for clarification. He pulled up the stolen Stresso transport and ran a course calculation in under 2 minutes. The idea was not elegant. It was the kind of idea that works because it is exactly stupid enough to be outside the range of things a sensible opponent plans for. The stolen Stresso transport, broadcasting its original Stresso identification codes, would move to intercept the patrol and tell them it had located the target, but that the location data was corrupted and needed relay. This would, at minimum, cause confusion. At maximum, it would bring the patrol to a full stop while they tried to sort out why one of their own ships was behaving erratically. Meanwhile, Kaito would take the Ark's own emergency intercept craft. There were 3 of them, sealed in launch bays that had opened exactly as designed when the ship came online, and do something about the patrol's ability to communicate with Captain Koger's command ship. The intercept craft were not fighters. They were rescue vehicles, designed for the recovery of crew in emergency situations, armed only with the minimum necessary to clear debris from a recovery path. Kaito had flown worse. He suited up alone in the launch bay. Balu was on the Ark's bridge, which had turned out to be operable with some improvisation. Ryu was in the transport. Kaito stood in the launch bay and did what he had always done before a sortie, which was not to pray exactly, but to do the thing that prayer is a version of, to acknowledge privately, to the part of the universe that was not him, that he was afraid, and that he was going anyway. His sister used to call this his launch face. She said he always got it before anything difficult. He hadn't known it was visible. The Stresso Patrol had excellent sensors and good coordination and training that Kaito had studied from intelligence reports well enough to understand. What they did not have was a framework for the situation they were now in, which involved a distressed friendly vessel, a massive and apparently operational derelict that their briefings had not included, and an attack from an unpowered rescue craft that appeared from behind an asteroid with no sensor signature to predict it. The first patrol ship went comms dark in the first 12 seconds. Kaito threaded between the other two on a course that looked like a collision and became a banking pass at the last possible moment, close enough to the second ship's hull that he could see the running lights reflected in his canopy. He fired the second targeting package on a trajectory that he had worked out in his head during the 16 hours of waiting, because there had been nothing else to do, and which required the package to travel in a curve that the package was not technically designed to travel in, but which obeyed enough of the relevant physics to work. It worked. The third patrol ship was not damaged, but was now in a position where it could either pursue Kaito or address the much larger tactical concern of a 12-kilometer vessel from the ancient era powering up its main drive 200 kilometers away. Its captain made the rational choice. They ran. Kaito brought the intercept craft back to the Ark's launch bay and sat in the cockpit for a while after he shut the engine down. His hands were shaking, which they always did after. He had never found a way to stop this and had eventually decided he didn't want to. It was the body's honest accounting of what had just happened, and honest accounting seemed important. He went to the bridge. Balu had, in the hours since the drive came online, decoded enough of the Ark's systems to understand the basic navigation interface. This was remarkable. Kaito said so. The language is old, Balu said, but not as different as you might think. Languages from 1200 years ago and languages from now are like the same river at different seasons. The water changes. The bed does not, he paused. Also, Sophia sent us a guide file through the comm array. I may have been using that. Kaito sat down in what turned out to be a seat that had been designed for someone approximately his size, which shouldn't have been as reassuring as it was. Ryu? Coming in. He put the transport in a spin to make it look like it had been hit. The patrol will report a confused engagement and a damaged asset. Kogar will not know what to make of it for at least several hours. That's all we need. He opened a channel to the surface. It took him 4 tries to reach Dara. When she answered, her voice was careful, the way voices get when a person has learned not to react to things until they understand what the thing is. The Ark is active, Kaito said. I need you to tell every group you have contact with. Tell them the location, not the coordinates that can be intercepted. Tell them the old name, the one from the songs. A silence. Kaito, she said. If we tell people the Ark is active, they'll fight harder, he said. Yes, Kogar will respond. Yes. But he won't be able to coordinate the response clearly because his patrol group just went quiet and he doesn't know why. He paused. We have a window. I want to put something through it. Another silence. He could hear in the background the sounds of the processing station, children moving, the low voices of adults. Then Dara said, the name from the songs is Liabe. Tell them Liabe lives, Kaito said. The next 48 hours were the kind of hours that collapse when you try to recall them later into a series of distinct moments rather than a continuous experience. Ryu brought the transport in and they spent 6 hours converting the Ark's cargo holds into emergency habitation. There was, extraordinarily, pre-positioned equipment for exactly this purpose in sealed storage bays. Equipment that was centuries old and still functional because the people who had built the Ark had planned for everything they could imagine, and apparently they had imagined this. Groups of survivors began making their way toward the Belt. Not all of them made it. Some were intercepted. Some turned back. Enough came through. Kogar sent a second patrol. Then a third. Ryu dealt with the second by navigating the stolen transport into the Belt on a course that used the asteroids themselves as cover, making the patrol's formation break up to track him, and then losing them in a debris field and circling back. Balu dealt with the third by powering up the Ark's forward array, not the weapons array, which they hadn't located yet, but the communications array, at full broadcast power, which was strong enough that the patrol's own instruments went haywire with the interference, and 2 of the 3 ships broke off their approach. I did not shoot anyone, Balu noted with evident satisfaction. Noted, Kaito said. Sophia arrived on the 2nd day. Her ship, the 3-masted thing, ancient and deeply impractical and somehow entirely self-possessed, came alongside the Ark with a precision that spoke of either extraordinary skill or assistance that Kaito couldn't identify, and she came aboard through a docking collar that the Ark extended as if it had been expecting her. She was older than her voice suggested, or younger. It was difficult to say. She had the quality of being exactly the age she was, and no more or less. She looked at the Ark's bridge with an expression that was not quite surprise, and not quite recognition, the way a person looks at a face they knew in a photograph and are now seeing in person. You woke her, she said. Mostly she woke herself, Kaito said. We just showed up. Sophia looked at him. That is generally how it works, she said, as if this answered a question he hadn't asked. Then, Kogar is moving his command ship. He'll be in the belt within 18 hours. What does he want with it? Kaito asked. The Ark, specifically. What tyrants always want with symbols, Sophia said. To demonstrate that they are more powerful than the thing that gives people hope. She walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars. He is going to come here, and he is going to bring enough force to destroy this ship, and the people of this system will watch it happen, and that is what he believes will end the resistance. The bridge was quiet. He's not wrong, Ryu said from the navigation console. He's not entirely wrong, Sophia said, but he's working from an incomplete understanding of what the Ark is. She turned from the viewport. The Ark was not built to be a symbol. It was built to carry people. It still does that. It does that right now, with the people in the cargo holds. A symbol can be destroyed. A function cannot. She paused. But that is something you have to show him, not tell him. Kaito worked it through. The Ark was massive, old, powered, but slow. Kogar's command ship was fast and heavily armed. The belt provided some protection. The asteroids limited the command ship's firing arcs, but the command ship outgunned them by an order of magnitude. They had 2 modified intercept craft, a stolen transport with its own weapons, and a 3-masted vessel of uncertain type that Kaito was increasingly sure operated by principles he didn't fully understand. He looked at Ryu. Ryu looked back at him. I know that face, Ryu said. That is the face that means you have an idea that I am going to hate. You are, Kaito said. Get everyone in the cargo hold secured. Balu, I need to know if this drive will give me full thrust on demand. It will, Balu said. Then here's what we're doing. Kogar's command ship came in exactly as Sophia had predicted, 18 hours later from the orbital plane, using the asteroids as reference points rather than obstacles. A commander who knew his ship's capabilities and moved accordingly. He brought 2 escort vessels and 4 fast attack craft. It was, objectively, more than enough. Kaito let him get close. He let him get close because the thing about the belt was that it worked both ways. The asteroids that limited the command ship's firing arcs also blocked certain approach vectors, and Kaito had spent the intervening 18 hours charting every one of them. He had not slept. He had drunk an enormous amount of the bitter hot liquid that Balu carried in a sealed flask, and which he had never been able to identify, but which kept a person functional in a way that coffee had always aspired to. When the command ship reached the position Kaito had calculated, close enough that its targeting systems had a full lock on the Ark, far enough that it hadn't yet committed to a firing solution, he did not run. He drove the Ark forward, not toward Kogar, toward the asteroid to Kogar's left. The Ark was massive and old and slow to accelerate, but 1,200 years ago, the people who built it had been moving across interstellar space with technology that was, in its way, more sophisticated than what came after, because it had to work perfectly or everyone aboard would die. The drive responded. The Ark moved. Kogar's command ship adjusted. The fast attack craft broke formation to flank. Ryu, in the stolen transport, came out from behind on the asteroid on Kogar's right, which was now undefended. This was not the plan that would destroy Kogar's ship. This was the plan that would put Kogar's ship in a position. The distinction mattered. The position was command ship between the Ark and a large asteroid, fast attack craft scattered by the need to cover both flanks, escort vessels following standard doctrine by staying between the command ship and the primary threat, which meant they were now between the command ship and Ryu's transport. Ryu took out one escort with 2 shots, and immediately pulled into a trajectory that curved around the asteroid, which the remaining escort could not follow without breaking formation. The escort chose formation. Ryu disappeared. The command ship fired. The shot hit the arc on the forward quarter, and the ship rang like a bell, struck by something enormous. Kaido felt it through the deck plates, through his boots, through his back where he was pressed against the seat. Warning systems he hadn't known. The arc had lit up in that old script that he was beginning, slowly, to read. The cargo holds were intact. The drive was intact. He brought the arc around on the axis that Baloo had calculated would give them the fastest response time, which was not a graceful maneuver. The ship was too massive for grace, but was a functional one. He had the arc between the command ship and the asteroid now, in the geometry he had planned for, and the command ship's captain was a good officer doing excellent work in a situation he hadn't been briefed for. But the situation he hadn't been briefed for was the situation Kaito had been planning for 18 hours. Sophia's ship did something that Kaito chose not to look at too carefully. It appeared on the command ship's starboard quarter in a position it could not have reached from where it had been without violating several principles that were generally considered fixed, and it broadcast on every frequency simultaneously a message that Kaito heard through the bridge speakers. It was not a threat. It was not a declaration. It was the old song, the one from before. The opening theme from the age of the first ships. The one that the settlements had been singing for 1,200 years in slightly different forms. The one that every child on Analysis had learned before they learned anything else. It came through the bridge speakers in a voice that was clear and unhurried, and in the 12 seconds it took for the command ship's captain to cut his own receivers. Kaito moved the arc to the position he needed, and Ryu came back from behind the asteroid with the transport, and Baloo brought the arc's forward array to full power. The communications array, at full power, pointed at a ship that was 20 kilometers away, did not destroy that ship. What it did was make every instrument aboard that ship temporarily unreliable. What it did was make the command ship functionally blind for 90 seconds. 90 seconds, in a belt full of asteroids, in a position the ship hadn't chosen for itself, with its escort broken and its fast attack craft out of position, was enough. Kogar requested terms. He did not get particularly good ones. Ryu negotiated, which meant they were precise and technically fair, and left Kogar feeling as though he had been outplayed in a game he hadn't known was being played. Which was accurate. The occupation didn't end that day. Occupations don't end in a single engagement. They end in the weeks afterward, in the slow withdrawal, in the negotiations that are boring and necessary, and nothing like the engagement itself. The stress pulled back to their orbital positions. Then they pulled back to the outer system. Then, under terms that the Solar Federation, which had sent representatives on the 4th day, once they understood what had happened, would enforce, they withdrew entirely. The arc remained. They brought it into the orbital lane slowly, over 2 days, because the drive was magnificent but not fast, and because Kaito wanted to do it properly. He wanted the people on the surface to see it coming. He wanted them to have time to understand what they were seeing. The children from the processing station were in the cargo hold, which had been converted from emergency habitation to something approaching acceptable. Dara had found a way to keep them occupied, which involved a great deal of running in circles in the main corridor, and occasional singing of songs that Kaito didn't recognize, new ones the children had invented in the 9 days they'd been hiding. He passed through the corridor twice and listened to fragments of the songs. They were not particularly sophisticated, musically. They had the specific charm of things made by people who are making them for themselves, rather than for an audience. On the bridge, Ryu was talking to the resistance group leaders on the surface, coordinating. He had been talking for 6 hours. He looked energized by this, which told Kaito something about Ryu that he had suspected but not confirmed. Ryu was a person who needed a problem, not conflict exactly. A problem, something with edges. Baloo was at the viewport watching Analysis grow. Kaito stood beside him for a while. "My people have a word," Baloo said without preamble, "for the kind of action that doesn't require discussion, because it is simply what one does. We use it for eating, for breathing, for sleeping." He paused. "And for this," Kaito said. "For going back." Baloo looked at the planet, when it would be easier not to. Kaito thought about this. He thought about the long, empty stretches of the outer run, and his sister's voice in the recording, and the way the bronze sky had looked unchanged even when everything beneath it had been changed. He thought about the children's songs in the corridor. "It's not easier not to," he said finally. Baloo considered this. "No," he agreed. "I suppose it isn't." Sophia came to the bridge sometime in the early hours of the third day, when the ark was in its final approach and Annales filled the main viewport and the lights of the surface were visible. She stood beside Kaido and did not say anything for a long time. "You'll stay?" he asked. "For a while," she said. "There are other systems." He looked at her. "How many?" She looked back at him with an expression that was, he realized, something like fond. "Enough," she said. "Always enough." When the ark reached its orbital position, the position the original navigators had chosen 1,200 years ago, and which the automated systems moved toward without Kaito's input, following a memory encoded in the ship's bone, the surface below lit up. Not with weapons, not with signals, with lights. All at once, in every city and settlement and camp and hiding place that could manage it, every person on Annales who had a lamp or a fire or a working power cell turned it on. The continent below became a map of itself, drawn in points of light, 7 million people sending the only message that didn't require a frequency. Kaito sat in the captain's chair of the oldest ship in the system and watched them, he thought, for the first time since he had dropped out of fold space above a system that should have been home and found it dark. There they are. Ryu appeared in the doorway. He had finished the 6 hours of talking, and now looked like a person who had finished 6 hours of talking, which was to say vaguely dazed but fundamentally satisfied. He looked at the viewport. "Well," he said. "Well," Kaito agreed. "Balu from the other side of the bridge. The trajectory is stable. We can hold this position indefinitely." "Then we hold it," Kaito said. Outside, the planet turned, and the lights turned with it, and the old ship kept its orbit with the patience of something built to last, and below, 8 million people who had been told for 3 months that they were alone understood, in the particular way that understanding sometimes comes, not as information, but as a shift in the weight of things, that they were not.